Okay, hi everyone. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to our broadcast for the week. We have kind of a familiar face. This is Mike. He's one of our clinicians here at PB&J. Not last week, but the week before, right? 2 weeks ago, he did
I think so, yeah.
a topic with me. So if you want to go back and watch it, feel free after this to get on there and watch that one. Tonight we're going to be talking about kind of the cycle of behaviors and how they work with emotions and how to teach them to work together. Mike's going to lead this discussion. It's going to be pretty brief and concise and to the point. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or to message the Facebook page privately and we can address those. Other than that, I'll turn the time over to Mike.
Awesome. Thanks, Maddie. Yeah, glad I could be back. This is a fun thing that Maddie and I get to do on occasion. So the term that we're going to talk about tonight is called behavioral activation. And so behavioral activation basically means we're going to activate our behavior to change our emotional state. So I wanted to address a cycle first and then talk about some interventions that might help kind of disrupt the cycle. So a lot of times when we feel depressed, we also feel lonely, apathetic, unmotivated, tired, just a bunch of different emotions, right, and feelings. Now, I don't know about you, Maddie, but when I feel those things, I kind of just want to do nothing.
Yeah.
You know, I talk to a lot of clients and they say, I think the number one answer is lay in bed and watch Netflix or
Yeah, it's hard to
eat
get
junk food,
motivation. Yeah.
right? And so let's say hypothetically, Maddie, I was to say, okay, for one whole week, I want you to do a couple things. I want you to do nothing. I want you to eat as much junk food as possible. I want you to close those blinds. I want you to spend as much time on your phone as possible, like looking through social media. I don't want you to talk to any of your loved ones. I want you to just kind of sit in a deep, dark hole for a week. How do you anticipate you would feel after that week, or what emotions would come up for you?
I think for me personally, I'd feel very lost getting back into the real world, especially since, sometimes it can be really easy to get down in those deep, dark holes, even when nobody's asking you to. Um,
Yeah,
but I would for sure feel lost and probably confused and maybe a little bit angry, like not
totally.
knowing how to regulate that or how to kind of get your body back in your emotions back to where it's normal and you are regulated and you're within that window of tolerance. That would probably be the hardest thing for me in that situation.
Right. No, and you're exactly right. And you're kind of echoing a lot of the things that a lot of the clients I work with say. So, to really kind of frame out this cycle, when I feel depressed, lonely, confused, lost, unmotivated, I'm more likely to engage in behaviors like nothing, sleeping, laying in bed,
Right.
undereating, overeating, isolating. Those behaviors then reinforce the initial emotion. So let's say we have depression over here. Depression makes me want to do nothing. Doing nothing makes me more depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems simple enough, but that can be really hard for people.
Right.
I hear a lot of things like, I can barely get out of bed in the morning, or I can barely show up to work on time if I show up to work at all. I can't get any of my to-dos done. And that feeling of not being able to accomplish things actually increases that depressive state and that emotion again. And so one of the ways that we can intervene with that is when you think about the behavior, amplifying again the emotion. What we want to do is we want to try and change the behavior. So when we talk about emotions and behaviors, we focus so much on emotion because it's a very important thing, right? There's a lot of I feels, which is a very important. We haven't always had that in our culture,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that it's important that we're focusing on our emotions. The only downside to that is we're focusing on something that we have little control over. For example, when you hear bad news, we don't have to say, "Man, that's terrible news. I'm choosing to feel depressed about that," right? We
Yeah.
hear the
Right.
news, and then we feel depressed. So, yet we can do something that will help influence or change the emotion. But once again, that's a behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we have these kind of two camps, we see them as opposites. But like you mentioned earlier, I want to talk about how we can get these things to work together.
Yeah.
So when we have this emotion that's overwhelming, and we're using depression tonight as the example, and it makes me want to do these things that reinforce the depression. What if we were just to alter that slightly? So let's say I feel depressed and unmotivated and it's hard for me to get out of bed. What if instead of laying in my bed, what if I sat in a chair by the window? And I know that doesn't sound like a huge difference, but that actually can change a little bit of that mood state, right?
Yeah.
Or, if I feel like doing nothing, doing something, getting up, walking around the block. I feel like watching Netflix, maybe I get a book, maybe I read a new book. And even if these behaviors are difficult for us, it's a really good way for us to try and change that emotion. And I have an example that I want to share, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I'm obviously not going to use any names or any identifiable information, but worked with a client several years back, and we tried this technique. And their issue was staying in bed with the blinds closed and just not getting out of bed. And so we said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to sit on your porch. They lived not in the place that, they didn't live in Cedar. It's a lot warmer where they lived. And so they'd go sit on the porch. And they, one morning they decided to go do that. And they sat and they watched a lot of people walking by on the road. And they noticed that a lot of people were leaving this humongous red brick building that they'd never noticed before. They lived in this place for about 6 months. They're from out of state.
Yeah.
And they look over at this building like, what is that? And it struck this, chord of curiosity. So they walked over to the building, and come to find out it was the public library, right? So they walk into the library and they're like, man, I haven't read a book since 4th grade. And of course they checked out one of the Harry Potter books, right? And they came back and they said, Mike, I can't tell you, I've spent the last week just engrossed in this book, and I forgot how much I love reading. And in the mornings now, I have a reason to wake up. I go and I sit by the window and I'm reading Harry Potter. And that's just one of those very, it's a good example to share because it fits within the model, right?
Right.
And what's interesting is it wasn't life-changing. All of a sudden, he didn't have a job, or grades didn't shoot up from school, and all these different things. However, the reason to get out of bed then ended up helping this client change other behaviors later, right? It's hard to change stuff when we're just laying in bed all day.
Mm-hmm.
And so what was so cool about this is the behavioral activation cycle, kind of breaking that. It's an intervention, which means it's something that we can do to help us feel better, but it's also an assessment. Like I just mentioned, this was a pretty good example of how this actually works for people, but I've had people that it doesn't work for at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so, being able to use this skill also gives us an idea of where our emotional state is. Let's say, for example, we try this skill and it works awesome. Every single time that we change a behavior, our mood state goes up, right? Or we're back within that window of tolerance. We feel content, we feel peace, we feel something different than the depression and lack of motivation. That would maybe indicate that our depression is potentially maybe more of a mild form. And, that would give us an idea of what kinds of treatments to do for that, right? Let's say it works kind of half the time. Maybe that's more of a moderate, and there's some other things that we can do. We talk to our primary care, talk about medication. And then if it's just like, I can't get out of that, I can't get out of that mindset, there's nothing I can do to really rescue myself, no behaviors are working, then maybe we're more in that severe category. And each one of these tiers has different intensity levels of treatment that we can do. And so by changing our behavior, one, we're trying to make ourselves feel better. And in the off chance that it doesn't work, that just helps the therapist know, or even the client know, that maybe we need a little bit more support. Maybe we need a little bit more help. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Would you mind clarifying the difference, or maybe not the difference, but between a behavior and an emotion? Because I feel like that's sometimes what can be so confusing, especially in a state like that.
Yeah. So I think, just kind of boiling it down, an emotion is something we feel, and the behavior is an action. It's a verb.
Right.
It's something we do, right? So if I'm feeling unmotivated, I'm probably not going to do anything, right?
Yeah.
And I think what's so, does that clarify that okay? Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, no,
Because I
I think
think
that
that,
makes total sense.
and I think you're right that there are so many times where we are in a state of, either extreme anxiety and panic, or, we're kind of in the depths of despair with
Yeah.
depression. And
Yeah.
that's hard to tell what's an emotion, what's a behavior, who even am I?
Right.
So being able to clarify what I'm doing is a behavior, and oftentimes it's a product of how I feel. Um, Now, I want to shift gears a little bit, if that's okay,
Yeah.
because I think that there's also this aspect and this idea, and I hear this a lot too, is, when I'm depressed, I don't have control of my behaviors. It feels like I don't have control, right? And I get that. I hear that a lot, and I understand that to mean that I'm feeling so lousy right now about my life and about myself, or about the things that I'm going
Understandable.
through,
Right.
that nothing I do is going to matter,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not going to move that needle. I'm still going to be depressed at the end of this behavior, right? So once again, going back, potentially that could mean maybe we need a little bit more support, maybe more resources, potentially medication, talking to your, general practitioner. But I also think that, and I want to use this example, because even when we feel like we don't have control, there still is a little bit of control that we do have. So for example, let's say that, I'm tied up, right? I'm tied up and someone is asking me, this is a terrible example, where's the map to the secret treasure, and I'm just like, you know, I, I don't have to tell them.
Right.
I have control of whether I can tell them or not.
Right.
I can pull a Daniel Craig from Casino Royale and I can tell him to beat me up, you know what I mean? Or I can just be quiet. So I still have control over what I say in that situation. And I think that we forget that. The emotion sometimes lies to us and it tells us we have no control whatsoever.
Yeah.
Even if it's I'm laying in bed and, you know, that those thoughts are saying, there's nothing you can do. Your life's going to continue to be negative. I could literally roll myself out of bed and lay on the floor. That is a different behavior, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've changed something, I've attempted something. And so I think sometimes this also comes down to a feeling of lack of control. And so when we activate those behaviors, right, speaking to the name of the model, we are attempting to change the emotional state. For example, like this client I mentioned
Mm-hmm.
felt excitement waking up because they had another activity to do with reading Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Um, maybe I start exercising and I start to feel confident in myself. Maybe I reach out to a trusted person. Maybe I call, a trusted friend, or, my parents or something, or, I talk to my spouse and I say, hey, like I'm feeling off right now. And normally I'm isolating, which makes me feel lonely.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I feel connected. Maybe I feel peaceful and content. And so it really is about being able to say, look, I know I don't really want to change my behavior. I don't feel like I can, but I'm going to try. And that's what's so cool. There's so much resiliency with the people that we work with at PB&J. It's such an awesome thing to see. I didn't think I could do it. I didn't think I could wake up and go to class and get a good grade, and I did.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a cool thing to see.
Yeah. And kind of just touching off of what you just said, being able to look at that and say or think to yourself, I might need some extra support. I might need to reach out to somebody to get some more resources because you're not always going to know where to find those. If
Right.
you ever find yourself in that position and you don't know where to reach out, please reach out to us. You can message the Facebook, you can look us up on Google, it'll give you our phone number. We can help connect you with some awesome resources, whether it's with our practice or different local practices that are just as great. All of these videos are posted on our website as soon as they are recorded, and they're always on our Facebook, so feel free to visit those as you need. A resource doesn't always have to be scary, doesn't always have to be something that you fear to reach out for, um, especially when you are experiencing those kind of states of up and down. So just kind of keep that in mind. That's a really great resource, and we do these every Wednesday. So, do you have
Yeah.
anything else,
Eh,
Mike, to add?
Yeah. I love that. Because I was just going to say, even if maybe therapy isn't what you need. Maybe it's
Yeah,
connecting
right.
to something else. We can help connect you to that, right?
Mhm.
And I think reaching out, once again, that's part of changing that cycle, just tying it
Right.
back into the model, right? I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling overwhelmed, anxious. I don't know what to do. I'm watching this this live broadcast on Facebook. They're saying to reach out. I'm going to reach out and advocate for myself. Guess what? You're
Right.
breaking the cycle. You're already doing the first step.
Yeah. And
And
that is
maybe
doing a behavior, doing an action.
exactly right.
Yeah.
So once again, we're changing action to hopefully change the mood. So
Yeah.
it's not as easy as it sounds. And I think the last thing I want to say is I know some people might say this sounds like the fake it till you make it kind of creed, right? But I think
Yeah.
there's a little bit more there's a little bit more science back behind that, which is pretty cool. And I think that
Mhm.
the more that we try it, once again, say it doesn't work, it's just information. It just helps us know
Right.
where you're at, and that can help you actually figure out, okay, what kind of care do I need? What level of care, right? Is this
Yeah.
mild, moderate, severe?
Yeah.
So that's kind of all I got. I'm glad that we got people
Yeah.
hopefully watching this and reaching out, and
Yeah. And
yeah,
then just one more thing I think I want to add. I feel like I say this in every single video, but it's good information. And it took a lot of times for somebody to say it to me before I fully understood that. What works for somebody else might not be your cup of tea. It might not work for you. So don't get discouraged. It's really easy to. If watching these videos isn't what helps you, maybe change that behavior and take that action to do something else or reach out to somewhere else to find that kind of thing that works. So, yeah, I just wanted to add that because I feel like that's good to remember as well, on top of all of this great information about teaching our emotions and behaviors to work together and practicing those things. So,
yeah. And I think the last thing to it, just to kind of build off of what you're saying, Maddie, is emotions aren't bad.
yeah,
Emotions are just information. If I'm
right.
feeling depressed, that's not a bad thing. It just tells me that I'm lacking something and maybe I need something. So um,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's awesome. Thank you, Maddie.
yeah, of course. Did you have anything else that you want to say or you good?
Nope, that's all I got.
Okay, well, thanks, Mike, so much for your information and your great topic tonight. Like I said, if there's any questions that you didn't get asked or that weren't answered in this information, feel free to send us a message. We can set up a time to talk to you or, even leave a comment on this video. We're always tracking our Facebook. So, yeah, that's it. Everybody have a great night, and we hope you next week.
Thanks, Maddie. See you, everyone.